Members, it being 5 p.m, proceedings are now interrupted to allow the Honourable Taylor Martin to make his first speech. Can I remind all honourable members that the Honourable Taylor Martin, in making his first speech in this place, that all members should extend to him the usual courtesies. Also, can I take the opportunity to welcome into my gallery members of the Honourable Taylor Martin's family, all here in the House today for the member's first speech. They include his mother, Mrs. Karen Martin, his father, Mr. Bruce Martin, and his grandmother, Mrs. Anne Martin. On behalf of all members, we welcome you into our gallery. I'll also acknowledge the presence of a number of ministers and members of the other place, and I understand that the Premier will be joining us. The Honourable Taylor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I begin tonight by accepting the weight of the responsibility that has been bestowed upon me, becoming the 875th member of the New South Wales Legislative Council in Australia's oldest parliament of our nation's first state. I pledge to ensure that I will use my time here to work towards the betterment of our great state, the first state, and to continue the tradition that we have in Western society of aspiring to leave more for those that come after us. I make that pledge here tonight in front of my friends and family, here tonight in the gallery. Many of you will have driven here tonight along the F3, or the M1 as Sydney-siders call it. Not only was this vital piece of infrastructure crucial to opening up the Hunter and the Central Coast to greater trade and employment opportunity for those already living on the coast and in the Hunter, but like my family, it opened up the region to families from Sydney. Like both sets of my grandparents who moved up to the Central Coast from Sydney's western suburbs around 60 years ago. My father's father, Gordon Martin, known to all as Bruce, spent years working away, excavating along the rock face of what would become the F3 on his Caterpillar D9. He moved the family up to Springfield, which is just east of Gosford, with his 7 children in a Housing Commission home. And his wife Anne, a nurse at Gosford Hospital, who is here tonight, despite being a Labor voter all her life. I'm sure that Nan will be a Liberal voter now, if only because we are the ones who have delivered a $348 million rebuild of Gosford Hospital. My grandfather was part of the hard work of building the F3, and he also built a life for our family on the Central Coast. He passed on to my father not only his name, but also his work ethic. Having left Gosford High School in Year 10, well before it became a selective school, my father Bruce did his apprenticeship and subsequently began his own kitchen manufacturing business, while still in his early 20s with his 2 young boys under his care. More than a decade later, my mum would meet my dad and marry him and become an integral part of our family business, basically running the whole show. My earliest memories are of spending days on the factory floor, watching my dad and my older brothers, Miles and Tristan, at work on the factory floor. Every night, our family dinner time was more like a staff meeting than anything else. I remember seeing the workplace grow and shrink month to month as demand varied and our local economy fluctuated through good times and the bad in the 1990s. Since before I had started school, when I would spend days playing in our office of our family's factory, I had a keen interest in how this world of ours worked, how people spent their days at work, their weekends at play in different ways, how some seemed to have a lot and some seemed to have just a little. I would wonder why, when I would see my mum hand out the cheques on payday, it would seem there was a lot to go around for those that worked on our factory's floor. When it came time to pay the mortgage, she was stressed and struggling. Why there would seem to be dozens of tradesmen coming to work some weeks, and some weeks there would just be my brothers and a few others on the shop floor. Why my friends would talk of their families' overseas trips, but the furthest we would get was Anna Bay Caravan Park and on to Nelson Bay for fish and chips. This keen curiosity led me to choose to study finance, commerce and economics at my local university, the University of Newcastle. I was the first from either side of my family to go to university, and I was the first and only to go to a private high school, having been harassed, bullied and physically assaulted to the point of having one side of my face smashed in and swollen to such an extent at my local high school that there was no way I could continue to attend that school. An extremely traumatic experience for any 12-year-old to face, which prompted years of intense anxiety and depression. Bullying is a dreadful scourge that changes children's lives. It steals their potential to contribute to our society and leads to mental health issues developing amongst our youth. In this place, we need to take a stand against bullying in schools, and that's why I was glad to see in yesterday's budget the announcement of a $6 million broad-based anti-bullying program. The unpopular Safe Schools program was only targeted at one group of students, but all students deserve protection against this behaviour. I look forward to working with the Education Minister, Rob Stokes, in designing this program and ensuring that we can put an end to bullying and support our kids at school. That experience has stayed with me every single day since. It is why I will stand against violence and intimidation of any kind in any place. In schools, yes, especially, but just as importantly, in the workplace, in politics, in the parliament, but also in the home. No one should be made to feel worthless and helpless in any environment. Domestic violence hits a nerve with just about everyone across our state. And as we see reported incidents on the rise, as more and more people take a stand, I'm certain every family has at least one story close to home, as I know I do amongst my friends and family. I will be an advocate amongst young men. I participate in the annual White Ribbon Day walk. I invite my friends and colleagues every year to join in, and I would like to see this initiative taken into all of our schools. We need to ensure that young boys who become young men get the mentoring needed to teach and emphasise the value and role of respect in all relationships, even if, and especially when, this is not modelled in their own home. I believe that I was gifted a keen sense of what is right and what is wrong from my mother, who in turn learnt from her parents, Jack and Ruth Stone. Jack worked on the floor at James Hardie in Sydney's western suburbs, the second generation of Stones to work on the factory floor there, with his father, my great-grandfather, having died in that factory while at work. While we are now well aware of the dangers of asbestos, during those days few knew the damage that these building materials could do to one's health. Jack was one of the first in a long line to call out and advocate for action to protect his fellow western suburbs workers and the families that they went home to. The trouble he would face as a result of speaking up was of no concern to him. He knew what was right and he would not desist, even if it cost him his job. In the end, Poppy Jack passed away at just 59 with fibres of asbestos in his lungs. Those that went before us, like my grandfathers, like many others, literally built this country and this state into what it is today, driven by a need and a desire to give their families a better tomorrow than the yesterday that they experienced. All the while, they inherently knew what was right and what was wrong and stood their ground without yielding when the time came. In those days, it may have been the unions and the Labor Party that focused on the needs of workers. But as we've seen through the Royal Commission into Trade Union Corruption and the example of union leader Craig Thompson, who was parachuted into the Central Coast seat of Dobell, Labor and the unions aren't standing up for the workers. They're picking their pockets. It is clear today it is the Liberal Party who are the ones who are on the side of the workers. We are the ones who back those families. Families like mine, Mr. President. We want them to succeed, we want them to contribute, and we want them to thrive. We should be unashamed as Liberals, as Conservatives, to stand up for the values and traditions that made New South Wales and Australia into the place that we know and love today. It is telling that in the Australia that we live in today, we're an accepting nation, a tolerant nation. However, it is now those of us who identify as conservatives, as traditionalists, who are pressured to feel ashamed and to conform with some perceived majority that is really just a construct of the left. The political debate has been changing. It is still changing, and the rate of change is quickening. In times such as these, when we have seen over 25 years of uninterrupted economic growth, the economic message that our party, our side of politics, has been strong on, has slipped in the minds of those in the electorate. Now, we see the left, the Greens and Labor, shifting the political debate towards one of social injustices and away from building the future of our economy and our society. I enter politics at a time when I believe the debate has had a permanent shift from one in which the right and left of politics has sought to improve the material standards of living of our population by differing means, the right with more individual freedom, harnessing the power of incentives and encouraging reward for effort, and the left with a focus on equality of outcomes backed up by the big hand of government. This debate has shifted, has evolved by the exacerbation of identity politics, by the rise of a victim culture. As Menzies said in his Forgotten People speech, in Australia, the class war must be a false war. Similarly, and with apologies to the great man himself, in Australia, the identity war must be a false war. Those who speak up for ideals and values that do not fit the narrative of the left's identity ideology are increasingly finding themselves told that they and their ideas are no longer needed and no longer heard. But Mr. President, scaring people into submission is not the same as winning the debate. Silencing your opponents is not leadership. I'm sure that in creating and exacerbating these divisions, tribal politics, identity politics, and cultural conflicts will serve some in their pursuit of power. But in creating and emphasising a victim culture, I fear that we risk raising a generation of dependents, with more leaners than lifters, when we should be continuing to foster the great Australian culture of resilience, enterprise and ingenuity. Our Parliament should reflect the families that we are here to represent and the individuals whose lives our legislation impacts and affects. Our Westminster system should continue to channel society's values into the laws that we make. I fear we are seeing an increase in a situation where those who are involved in the process of lawmaking, imposing their political wills to reshape the values of our Australian society as they see fit. Increasingly, I believe we hear views espoused by those in positions of influence which would be unfathomable at family dinner tables around our country. And likewise, every day there are conversations had, concerns raised at Sunday backyard barbecues across our state and our nation, which would be unwelcome and shut down if raised with most of the new political class who, ironically, are in a position to address these concerns. Instead of people having their concerns heard and addressed, we're instead seeing those involved in the media and left-wing politics impose their priorities into the national debate. There is a top-down approach which has pervaded and taken root within politics in Western society. It should therefore be of little surprise that Australians are moving their votes to independents and minor parties in search for a restoration of a bottom-up approach to the public debate. People do not want to keep hearing that they will be told what they can and cannot discuss and debate. Rather, they want to tell our elected representatives what should and should not be prioritised for debate. And they expect that these issues be addressed and not ignored because they might offend a certain group, because it may not be considered politically correct, because it doesn't fit in with the political agenda of the day, or the issue is just too hot to touch. These people are the majority in suburban Australia, and they are once again the forgotten people. I believe it is the Liberal Party who is listening to them and seeking to represent them. And I'm proud to be here as a member of the Liberal Party, as a member of this government, which does listen, which does respond to the concerns, the ideals, the aspirations of households around our great state. And in listening to their hopes and their dreams, It is a Liberal government which has ensured that our state is in a financial position to undertake a much-needed, once-in-a-generation infrastructure program to make record investments into our schools, hospitals and roads to address the critical issue of housing affordability, all without the need for increased taxes or increased debt. I believe our political debate needs to once again focus on continually improving the standard of living for all the people who we are here to represent and serve, regardless of a person's gender, skin colour, sexual preference, religion or birthplace. We should all be focused on allowing for the improvement in the lives of all. To do that, there needs to be more opportunity for everyone. I have outlined how I see our body politic changing. And we are also witnessing a change in our economy. And it is one which should be embraced and the opportunities seized. My generation will be the ones to deal with the challenges faced and benefit from the opportunities which will be brought by an increasingly faster paced world. In the next Parliament, due to begin in 2019, we will be regulating here in this chamber for jobs and industries which do not even exist yet and we haven't even thought of. When my predecessor, the Honourable Mike Gallagher, entered Parliament in 1996, email was just a new thing. There would be no Google for another 2 years. Apple products had not yet found their way into homes in the way in which they have found their way into just about every pocket that they have today. Not only had Uber not been conceived, but neither had the handheld smartphone that you would use to access such a service. The opportunities created by the next wave of capitalism will be enormous. We can already see the beginning of this movement with the advent of Uber, Airtasker and Airbnb. We will see the removal of barriers to entry as people can transact on a peer-to-peer basis, which will see the removal of middlemen that currently handle business, which will free up resources to be moved into other areas of our economy, which will in turn allow for others in other industries to flourish, providing more and more to go around for all of us in the long run. Already, Deloitte Access Economics estimates that just last year, over 92,000 people in New South Wales drew an income from being involved in these types of peer-to-peer small businesses, a number which has doubled from the year before, and a number which includes my semi-retired parents and their Airbnb that supplements their superannuation, while providing for tourists that visit the Central Coast and provides a material benefit to our local businesses, shops and tourist attractions. I know that with the advent of new technology and new ways of doing business, regional New South Wales will be in a better position to assert its economic prowess, especially the Hunter and Central Coast regions, which I have been selected to represent for the Liberal Party. I know from my time at the University of Newcastle that it is through the proliferation of technological change that our cities such as Newcastle and Gosford and the people who call them home will be in a position to have the successful future which we know they have always deserved. The City of Newcastle is undertaking a massive change, from the old days of BHP to a future which will be transformed by the culmination of the dreams and initiatives of those who choose to make it their home. And I know this will be especially shaped by many alumni who, like me, intend to live, work and invest in the region. My vision for the Central Coast, for the Hunter, and indeed our state, is one in which we as individuals, as families, as communities, as a society, build upon the opportunities which were gifted to us by our parents and our grandparents due to their hard work, to pick up the baton and continue to build. We owe it to them to continue the tradition of leaving more than we found when we came. We will always have families like mine who move to the regions from Sydney to build a better life. Many of my fellow Central Coast residents commute back and forth every working day, 2 hours each way, to Sydney in their quest to build a better life for their families. Over 30,000 residents from the Gosford end of the coast make this trip every day, by road or by rail. And I too was one of these commuters, travelling to and from Sydney, working for Mercer in the financial advice business, when I decided to get involved in politics. I did not believe that we had to accept the way things were on the Central Coast, that we cannot make it on our own, and that we have to resolve ourselves to the fact that upon finishing school or university, one must leave the place that they were born, grew up in and loved, must leave their family and their friends to be able to find work and buy a home. It was during one of these early morning commutes that I met my local Liberal candidate for Robertson, meeting commuters at 5:30 a.m. at Gosford Station. In just one meeting with Lucy Wicks, I knew that she was the real deal, so to speak. And as we got to talking about what our region could and should become, I then and there decided to become a part of this team because they shared our local vision for our region, which would bring more opportunity, which would back in our local businesses, like my family's cabinet manufacturing business, to grow and transform our region into one of abundance and opportunity for locals. Those of us who were recently on the campaign trail for the Gosford by-election saw the stark difference between the right and the left, as we saw Labor come out and announce a $100 million subsidy plan to give the coast a sugar hit with taxpayers' money. So they'll take $100 million away from local schools that need an upgrade, schools that need real classrooms instead of demountables, a common problem that this government is addressing after 16 years of Labor's neglect. They'll take $100 million away from local roads on the Central Coast and the Hunter, which are in a state of disrepair from Avoca to Anna Bay and out past Abernethy. Because Labor, the Greens, those on the left, they want the government to be the solution. They want to extract $100 million from those that are working hard and pick out some winners that they will subsidise. And as Margaret Thatcher said, the problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money. 16 years of a Labor government in New South Wales showed that and left our state in a mess. They want to come out time and time again, tell the electorate just how much money they're willing to dole out. They want to feed that sense of economic dependence. But we know what is needed is a hand up, not a handout. I know instinctively that's what those in my region believe in too. This is the spirit that my grandfather had when he moved the family up to the Central Coast from the western suburbs in the 60s. It's the spirit my dad had when he ventured out on his own as a young man who had not finished his studies at school, yet he set out to start his own business as a cabinet maker, which would underpin our family for almost 40 years. And it's what I followed in when I worked from the age of 14, washing cars in a West Gosford car yard and dishes at the Terrigal Bowling Club, saving up to be the first one in my family to go to university. Mr. President, I'm a product of my region. It is due to the experiences that I've had and the people that I've encountered to the north of the Hawkesbury that have shaped the views and the priorities which I now bring to this chamber. As the youngest member in the first and oldest parliament in the country, to my extended Liberal family, I am here, picking up the baton in this relay, doing my part as others have done before me, particularly the Honourable Mike Gallagher, to advance the Liberal cause and preserve our values well into the future. We truly do belong to a formidable team, and I'd particularly like to give thanks to those that have led our local campaign efforts on the ground in my patch. Andrew Clark, Chris Wicks, Todd Kirby, Christy Higgins, Harvey Thompson, Jack Wilson, Liam Covey, Bianca Colatzos, Charlie Bocock, Lane Edwards, Stella Shepherd, Beck Johnston, Rhiannon Beckers, Rebecca Gale Collins, Wendy Mashula, Jessie Gale, and Tim, Karen and Lydia Soden. The formidable Karen McNamara, Sally Halliday, Tina McQueen, David Watts and Sharon Annie Watts, Sam Giddings, Teresa Giddings, Jeff Strickson, Deanna Bocking, Elizabeth Reynolds, Godfrey Franz, Michelle Moffat, Colin Marchant, Bev Ferrier, Pam Collins and Joy Burrows, all integral, long-standing stalwarts of the party locally who have always provided assistance and guidance to me. Team Terrigal, headed up by the effective Adam Crouch MP, a champion of the Liberal cause and our local community, along with Jill Donald, Kerry Ann Delaney, Donna Golightly, Ben Sheath, John Barton and Anne Mackay. The whole Pillen family, Jilly, Mick, Fletch, Gabby and Banjo, for their support, friendship and tireless advocacy for our community. Banjo Skate Park is just the first of many achievements that I know we will have as a team. I'd like to thank Bob Mudge, Richard Keogh and Bruce McDonald, the former member for Kirribilli and former leader of the Liberals in this Parliament, for their mentorship and guidance and unwavering support for Conservative values. To those that have gone before me on the Conservative side of politics, I must thank the Honourable Scott Farlow for his guidance as I enter this place and replace him as the youngest member on this side of the chamber.
Oh man now.
To the Honourable Alex Hawke MP for his full and frank advice, Holly Hughes, Penny Fisher, Chantel Fenari-Osmond, Ben Shields and Simon Fontana for your support and counsel. Nick Campbell for backing me from the start, imparting your wisdom to me and challenging me time and time again. Taylor Gromosky for your dedication to preserving and emphasising the grassroots nature of our party and your keen sense of justice, which sets a good example for all young Liberals. To my Mercer family, Justin Pratt, Bronwyn Batty, Caroline Douglas, Chris Jurikovsky, Hilary Anthony Benson, and of course Natalia Dikovskaya, for all that you did for me during my time here in Sydney in the corporate world of finance before I was taken in by politics. Thank you. To Lucy, your vision for our region gave me hope and got me involved. Your ability to gather and inspire those close to you has made me and many others to become disciples in turning this vision into a reality. I am forever in your debt for the mentoring that you have provided, the encouragement at every step along the way on my journey from being a constituent of yours to being a colleague. As we build together bit by bit to see that our region can become all that we know that it can, with a Liberal dose of hope, reward and opportunity. I know that Molly Joy and Oscar will then be able to live out the vision that we share for young coasties and fulfil the potential that our region has to offer. Lucy, like Esther, you were born for such a time as this. I will take your advice and the advice of Max and Mary Warren, as was given to Jeremiah, not to say, I am but a youth. To my family, our own Central Coast Brady bunch, my brothers Miles and Tristan, my sisters Peter and Georgia. As different as we all may be, and as far-flung as we may be spread out across the country and all the way back to the UK, you should know I will always be here for you, as I know you have always been here for me. To my mum and dad, Bruce and Karen, for all that you have sacrificed, for almost half a century since my brothers came into this world, all in order to give us the opportunities which were well out of reach to you. I know all five of us will make your hard work worthwhile. To my colleagues, to my party, to my community, to my generation, we owe it to those that came before, and it is our duty to those that come after us, by birth or by choice, to leave this great state a better place than when we came. I pledge to continue that tradition and work towards that goal every single day that I am here, to enable aspirations, to enable opportunities. This will be reflected in the decisions I make and the positions I take during my time in this place. Thank you.
While congratulations are being given, can I also take the opportunity to welcome into the public gallery of this chamber the Honourable Margaret Davis, Liberal MLC, in this place from 1967 to 1978. Welcome back.
That comes at the last speech.
Well done, this should be fun.
Hey, good.
You got that out of the rail. Notice you didn't try to get the leg turn.
I've been wanting that.
Well done, you got the names in there, good stuff.
Congratulations.
Sorry, I walked down.